More allegations of corruption and abuse of taxpayer money have emerged against impeached Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. Now, Paxton has been under federal investigation since October of 2020, when multiple of his own hand-picked lieutenants went to the FBI with allegations of bribery and other potential crimes. Now, they claim that he helped a wealthy donor by the name of Nate Paul fend off an FBI investigation. We're gonna give you the details on that in just a moment. And back in the spring, Attorney General Ken Paxton became just the third person ever to be impeached in the state of Texas. Here's more on why he was impeached by his own Republican Party.
He put the interest of himself above the laws of the state of Texas.
Lawmakers began investigating Paxton back in March after he asked for $3.3 million in taxpayer money to settle a whistleblower lawsuit filed by staffers whom Paxton fired after they went to the FBI with their corruption allegations. The 20 articles of impeachment include charges of not only misappropriation of public resources, but also bribery, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy.
Now there are even more accusations of misconduct from Paxton's ex-staffers, and they include alleged abuse of taxpayer money. They say that he even reveled in the perks that came along with his powerful office. Last year, Paxton's travels were extensive. Records show that after winning a Republican primary runoff against George Bush, not the George Bush you're thinking of, it's a different George Bush, Paxton spent 2 months flying to cities in the Caribbean and Europe. It's unclear who paid for Paxton's travel, but the trips cost taxpayers a combined $91,000 for his security detail alone. And the purpose of his travel is even unclear. We don't know if he engaged in this travel for official business purposes or government purposes. I would venture to say that is not the case, but we live in a country where people are innocent until proven guilty, so we'll see what happens as this gets investigated. Last year, Paxton's lifestyle included more international trips than Texas's governor and lieutenant governor made combined, and a previously unreported visit to Qatar to watch the World Cup. There are also accusations of behavior that raised eyebrows among employees at all levels of Paxton's office, including requesting special license plates, but never paying the $12.50 to acquire them. And if you think that's petty, believe me, I got some details that get even pettier. Before we get to that, Cenk.
The coconut cake's my favorite. You guys are gonna love this.
You gotta stick around for the coconut cake.
Yeah, so look, the main thing here is he must have thought that he was above the law. And to be fair to him, that is how Republicans have been for at least 20 years in this country. So look, recently you got Trump, and Trump has broken dozens of laws, and he never got held to account until a couple of months ago. And so, but you don't need Trump. Republicans have been doing crazy corruption with no accountability at all, especially in the red states, where all this guy had to do, and he did it in his last re-election. At that point, they already knew the FBI was investigating. They already knew 7 staffers, now 8, but back then 7 staffers had said, no, this guy's really, we're all Republicans, this guy's really guilty, right? And they also knew that he was getting investigated by the state for different improprieties related to financial dealings, right? But he came out and said, I love Trump and we should have overturned the election. They're like, oh, you win right away, easy. Even in the Republican primary where he ran against George P. Bush, who's the nephew of George Bush. And so and he had a previous position, was a perfectly good candidate within the Republican field. No, I support Donald Trump. It doesn't matter how much of a criminal I am, put me back in, and the voters did.
Yeah.
And so what's shocking about the story is not his over-the-top corruption or the coconut cake. What's shocking about the story is that the other Republicans are holding him to account.
Mad props, by the way. Seriously, mad props to his staffers who did the right thing. Because when you think about other Republican politicians, Cenk, like let's say Rick Scott, the former governor of Florida, who is now in Congress, he committed one of the biggest Medicaid fraud schemes in American history and was not held accountable for it.
At the time, the single largest Medicare fraud in American history, billions of dollars. This company had to admit that they were guilty. They had 2 separate books that they maintained to do the fraud. had to pay a fine of nearly $2 billion. I mean, outright criminal, Rick Scott. But no, the company's guilty, but the CEO that did the plot wasn't guilty. Instead, he's in the Senate right now. And the Republicans are like, oh, you got rich by robbing little grandmothers? Oh, we love you, we love you. Let's make you governor, let's make you senator, etc. In this case, the main credit goes to the staffers who said, no, we came here to serve the people. We happen to be conservative. It doesn't mean we're in favor of robbery, right? And it shouldn't mean that at all. A little bit of credit to the politicians too, because they impeached him and now he's being tried in the Texas Senate. I say a little bit because they knew about these improprieties for years and years and years and years. And finally he got impeached when he attacked the House Speaker, Dade Phelan, a fellow Republican, for being drunk while being on the floor of the House. Was he drunk? Well, we showed you the video on an earlier show and there's some chance that it was. But an hour after he attacked the House Speaker released evidence against him and said, we're going to impeach him.
Oh my God, the Republican Party is incredible in some ways. Now, with that said, let's actually name names and give the proper people some credit, because David Maxwell, the Attorney General's former head of law enforcement and one of 8 deputies who reported him to the FBI, told investigators that Paxton once bought a $600 sports coat from a hotel store while at a conference and billed it to the event's organizer, Jesus Christ. And he was apparently all about the money, according to David Maxwell. He said he was all about the money. He always had his hand out. And let's get to the coconut dusted cake, because yes, it is the pettiest element to all of the allegations, but it's also, in my opinion, the most telling in regard to who Ken Paxton is and what his character is really about. So apparently around Christmas time for years, a Texas grocery store, HEB, sent a coconut dusted cake to the Attorney General's office, which everyone in the office got to enjoy. The staff members were able to enjoy. That changed after Paxton was elected, according to 3 former employees of his executive office. One said Paxton once told staff not to touch the cake because it was for his birthday, which is on December 23rd. Another said Paxton once had the cake brought to a Tex-Mex restaurant for a staff lunch, but never served it. The third recalled watching Paxton and an aide walk out of the office carrying the cake box. According to required gift logs kept by Paxton's office, the cake was worth $45. He just took the cake home for himself.
Yeah, I mean, the tale of the coconut cake is hilarious, right? And he's like, do you have the cake? Do you have the cake? We have the cake, ladies and gentlemen. And it's like dun 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 dun.
Can you imagine doing that, Cenk? Can you imagine, like, there's something the office looks forward to, right? Like every year there's a fan of the show or a local business that like sends us goodies to celebrate the holidays, and like Cenk just walks out like with the goodies. Like,
no, we don't need a hypothetical example. Craig makes these delicious Christmas cookies.
Right, that's
like,
right.
I look forward to Christmas. Now, a quarter of the reason I look forward is for Craig's cookies, right?
Yes.
And the minute that those hit the stand, it's okay. Everybody's looking forward to them. If I took them and I was like, dun, 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 and I'm like, so look, guys, there's 3 things here that are super telling. One is the coconut cake, as hilarious as it is. Not because of the $45, nobody cares about the $45, okay? But because he's being a douche to his own staff.
Exactly.
Like, he's such a bad guy. He's just robbing from everyone. He's robbing slices of coconut cake at the Tex-Mex restaurant, right? You're gonna eat the whole thing when you bring it home? Jesus Christ.
He's
anyway.
the kind of guy who would, sounds like it. By the way, but the other part of this, which I promised I'd give you details about, has to do with a guy named Nate Paul, who's a Texas real estate developer. And he contributed about $25,000 to Ken Paxton's campaign. Now, he got into some trouble, wanted the FBI off his back, and apparently Ken Paxton did him that favor. So documents filed by the House impeachment managers state Paul hired Paxton's reported mistress at his Austin firm so Paxton could see her more easily rather than traveling to San Antonio where she once lived. He's accused of using a fake Uber account so he could visit his mistress And he also used burner phones and a secret personal email account as well in order to keep in touch with her. Now, House impeachment managers wrote in response to Paxton's motion to dismiss a trial that this guy, Nate Paul, was facing, that Uber records reflect drivers picked up Paxton under the alias of Dave P. a block from his home and ferried him to his lover's or Paul's properties more than a dozen times from August 6th of 2020 to October 2nd of 2020. Now, Paxton is also accused of using the power of his office specifically to interfere with a federal investigation into Paul's alleged fraud and helping Paul avoid foreclosures of his properties. So according to that court filing, Paxton and Paul would often eat together and talk about Paul's desire to see the FBI's sealed search warrant affidavit for Paul's properties. On one occasion, when Paul expressed his desire to see the FBI search warrant affidavit, Paxton suggested that Paul can try an open records request. The significance is that Paxton's office would control the answer regarding whether Paul get the records. Paxton morphed the office of the Attorney General into Paul's concierge law firm, the filing says. They also claim that Paul bankrolled renovations at Paxton's multi-million-dollar house in McKinney. And aside from being under federal investigation, Paxton is also facing state securities fraud charges that date back to 2015. Like, this guy, it just has all sorts of issues. He's actually scheduled to return to a Houston courtroom in the state criminal case on October 6th.
Yeah, so I started saying the coconut cake is telling, but there's three other things that are telling. The $600 suit, not because of the $600, but because it's so brazen. The suit has absolutely nothing to do with the conference. He's like, so what? Just charge it to them, right? Shows you his intent. Nothing to do with anything else. Then the 2-month vacation paid for. And by the way, the $91,000 was for security. We don't even know if they paid extra for him to actually stay at different resorts, etc. when he went to Europe and the Caribbean for 2 months. But what does that have to do with official business in Texas? Really a lot of important business going on in the Bahamas and Paris for the state of Texas. It's absurd. But of course, the most important one is the one that, with the real estate developer that Anna just told you about. That is very significant fraud charges. And of course he should be criminally tried for this, let alone impeached. And so really this guy's paying off for your mistress, etc. And then you're making sure that he doesn't get charged with fraud because you're the attorney general. This reminds me of a guy that I interviewed a long time ago that wrote a book about the best way to rob a bank is to run a bank. And in this case, the best way to not go to jail is to be the attorney general who decides who goes to jail and not. He's been facing these charges, some of these charges since 2015. And they can't prosecute him because he's the freaking attorney general.
Insane.
So look, Republican voters, you should do better. It's true of Democratic voters in other contexts too. But you should do better than me like Trump in order to vote for a guy.
But also,
you should pick conservatives who are honest and decent and actually believe in the things that you believe in.
But also, reporters, how about you actually inform the voters about the candidates and the potential criminality that they're involved in before they get elected into office? I mean, look, this isn't on a local level, but remember, George Santos is currently a member of Congress because no one looked into his record or his lies until after he got elected. That is a problem. That is a huge problem. That is a big flaw in our democratic process. You can't have a well-functioning democracy unless you get the money out of politics. That's part one. But also, unless you have an informed electorate, you need actual journalism in order for that to work.
Yeah, and this guy's won several elections and he's had these things hanging over him for a long time. And so even if you think that, well, the press didn't do a great job in the first election for sure, and well, a lot of people knew by the time of the second election, well, that's why I say the second election is more on the voters. Guys, you had an excellent sense this guy was a crook. Just saying I like Trump shouldn't be good enough to override the fact that he's a crook. Yeah. So I don't know if at this late date, Republican voters have still turned on Paxton or not, right? Like, facts matter. Doesn't it matter whether he robbed you or he didn't rob you? It definitely should matter. Thanks for watching the Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships.
You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.